Mr. Inslee?
Thank you. Congressman Maloney, when we do these wilderness bills, we frequently have all kinds of adjustments to take into consideration local concerns about boundaries, about water, about recreational access and the like. We just finished one up in the state of Washington where we did that. I'm making the assumption that you and other co-sponsors, I'm one of the co-sponsors of the bill, are amenable to local concerns about specific boundaries, about specific recreational issues? Absolutely.
Access, boundaries, treatment.
So is
absolutely amenable.
I think one of the reactions I've heard to the bill is people think because it's multi-state and multi-congressional district, we historically have done just wilderness pieces one at a time, congressional district at a time. That doesn't really fit the ecology very well, because elk and deer and bears don't respect congressional boundaries. I can't understand why, but they don't. And I think people are troubled, or it's kind of a foreign concept that you do a wilderness that actually crosses political boundaries. Now, I myself don't have a problem with that if we respect the ability of local citizens to have real input on specific boundaries, on issues of, we had an issue whether Boy Scouts could use a trail they've always used before, for instance, and we worked through it in our wilderness. And I assume we could do the same thing in this type of larger approach. Is there any reason we couldn't?
No, that's absolutely the legislative process moving forward.
Congressman Rayburg, do you disagree with that? I guess the question is, let's assume that we have issues about the Montana proposal, the part in Montana. Let's say that you have concerns about mountain bikers or motorcycle riders or some issues about access like that. Is there any reason we couldn't work through those in a multi-state bill like this, just like we do when we do it one smaller unit at a time?
We even have difficulty doing it between forests. And might I just suggest to you, Mr. Inslee, that your grizzly bear killed one of my dogs last year. Your wolves got into my corrals and killed 55 of my goats on private property. So your animals don't necessarily respect state boundaries, county boundaries, or ranch boundaries. And I, as a manager of the land, have to deal with your problem. So why wouldn't a previous speaker respect our position in having to manage the property on behalf of the American public so your trees are not dying from beetles, your trees are not burning, your lands are not creating noxious weeds on my property because your government, our government, and us through the appropriations process do not appropriate enough dollar to control our problem. And so yes, it is necessarily an us versus you, because we're not getting the kind of relief or recognition that we're the ones that have to deal with the problems as they arise.
Well, I must show that sometimes huskies and cougars disagree.
Well, mountain lions are a big problem on my ranch as well.
I understand. I will show I disagree with you. Those aren't my grizzlies. They're our grizzlies. Those aren't my
Then allow us an opportunity to change the Endangered Species Act so that we can manage them appropriately so we don't find ourselves in lawsuits when they are finally reestablished as the rules suggested we should
let me get back
limit the appeals.
Let me get back to the real question that I want to ask you. And I think it is a serious question. Okay, so I'd ask you to think about this seriously. When we do wilderness bills, we frequently work through all of these numerous issues to massage and sand these bills to get it down where there's something where can be supported by local community. Is there any reason intrinsically that we could not do that in Montana, or, and this is my question, the heart of my question, or would you just be resistant to any wilderness designation in this area?
Not at all, and I guess what I've figured out, having been in Congress long enough, that on both sides of the extreme, people will support reform as long as it doesn't change anything. And that is the difficulty we have with the endangered species as we try to make changes, and that is the difficulty we find ourselves in wilderness designation. I had suggested 3 criteria: hard release, a limitation on appeals, and a recognition of state water rights. And I know we don't necessarily talk about other legislation before Congress, but the Clean Water Reauthorization Act wants to federalize state water. And so we are real fearful of the changes, and it isn't east versus west, it's urban versus rural.
So are you opposed to any wilderness designation in Montana under the existing endangered species law?
No, again, I suggested if we address the issues of particular concern, we get a local buy-off, a local understanding, and a local consent, and a recognition of a limitation of the appeals process, hard release, and raw rights, then we have something to talk about.
Thank you.